Hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you back to my channel. Thank you for finding me. If you're new here, I post once a week about growing cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne in Australia without a greenhouse or without grow lights, humidifiers or any other equipment. It's just indoors or it's outdoors or it's not at all. So if that sounds of any interest to you, do hit subscribe. I do post every week. I am a complete amateur and I started this channel because I found it quite hard to find information about growing orchids in environments similar to mine. So if I'm of any use, I am very happy about that. And today, plant lovers, not really a success, an event, let's just say, with this beautiful orchid. But some issues, and so that's what I want to go through today, just to have a look at this plant and see what I've done wrong, what I may have done kind of right, and what you might think I could do to improve. Okie doke. So without any further ado, let me tell you that this fabulous orchid is Coelia bella. Bella. We can imagine that clearly Bella means beautiful. A fantastic orchid. It is from a small group that is largely found naturally in Central America. So this is a species type orchid, which means it is as it's found in the wild. It hasn't been hybridized, and it is quite amazing. The flowers are quite something, but I feel I have been very miss rather than hit with my care of this plant. So I'm going to go through what I've done, I'm confessing, and maybe how I can improve. This is like a job review, my 12 monthly review. Matthew, I think you could improve your PowerPoint. Anyway, let's get back to this. So, Coelia bella, I bought it because, well, the flowers just look really beautiful in the image, and it is a cool to warm grower that likes comparative shades. So I thought, that's going to work for me. Now I've seen the orchids, and there's a few different species in the family, but I've seen them described as terrestrial, epiphyte, lithophyte. So I guess it will depend on the exact species and the location, but I guess we could assume that, like a lot of orchids, it's an opportunist. So if the right nook appears, it's going to settle in. But what I have also read about it is that it is an orchid that likes moisture. So it's not a boggy, marshy orchid that needs to have wet roots, but it's an orchid that perhaps doesn't want to dry out. And apparently it's got roots not dissimilar to Paphiopedilum in that they're quite hairy, and so they don't really want to dry out completely for too long. So that, I think, brings us to the major issue for me. So when I bought this, it was a division, and there were, I think, probably 3 pseudobulbs, which were quite juicy and healthy and looking very happy. And as you can see, its growth habit is sort of not dissimilar to quite a lot of Coelia. So you've got quite a beautiful sort of pear-shaped pseudobulb with beautiful strappy leaves coming out of the top. So quite a handsome plant unto itself. Now it is early winter in Australia and mine is in bloom, and the flower spikes appeared, probably at least 6 weeks ago. So they've taken quite a long time to emerge. And as you can see, in comparison to the height of the plant, the flower spikes are quite short, but each spike has a huge cluster of flowers, and the colors are so bright that it really pings out against the green of the leaves. So normally I'm not sort of into orchids that bloom quite low down because they're often just difficult to see and they're a bit more specialized, I think. But this one I thought, stands out because the flowers are so beautiful. And let's have a quick look at them. So it's sort of basically a very sort of off-whitey cream with these incredible touches of pink, but then almost like a fluoro lime in the lip, which really makes the flower stand out. Absolutely stunning, and quite a few in a cluster. And the other thing is famed for its fragrance, and there's a real sort of almondy, marzipan-y aroma to the flower. It's very beautiful. It's quite a sort of a patisserie smell, I think, of sort of certain types of cake. Anyway, but it's quite beautiful, a lovely fragrance and quite unusual. So I'm really happy it's bloomed, and I'm really happy that I can smell it. Because sometimes you could get a specimen that just decides not to switch on its fragrance. Anyway, so those are all the things that are immediately obvious. Now, you can see perhaps too that it sends out new growths from the base of the pseudobulb. as many other orchids do, and that the flower spike comes from the base of a mature pseudobulb as well. So I'm presuming that it's going to bloom off last year's matured pseudobulbs. I bought this plant probably 8 to 10 months ago. Wasn't really sure when it was going to bloom. Some people say it blooms in summer, some in autumn, some in winter. Anyway, it is now early winter and mine has chosen to bloom, so I can assume that's current for my climate. But the other thing is I also have new vegetative growth at the same time. So this then gets to the question of care, plant lovers, and what I may or may not have done right. So now that I've kind of given you the big picture, let's look at some details, and you can perhaps see, and I'll come in closely, there is a lot of sort of brown discoloration to the leaves, but also in the new growths. Some of the central leaves have blackened, and in fact one of the new growths actually completely just stalled and died completely. So I think, plant lovers, my biggest mistake with this is that I just haven't been watering it properly. I feel that it's kind of been struggling to find the energy and the moisture to grow, and then when it needed it I didn't provide enough, and it's, you know, trogging along. But then I think the other mistake I made was when I did water it, I doused it, and a lot of water settled in the leaf joints, and I think has caused problems with the new growth. So I think it's feast, famine, feast, famine. I've denied it too much water, so it's dehydrated, and then I gave it too much, and I think probably encouraged some kind of bacterial issue in the leaf joint. So I don't know, I think I've made a real pig's ear of this, to be brutally frank. I'm amazed it's flowered. And then if we look at the flowers, you can see the sheaths of the flowers are actually quite brown. Now, I have seen in other images that is perhaps not inconsistent with other blooming, but I would also say that my flowers haven't opened particularly. Now, these flowers have been open for over a week, so they've had plenty of time to mature. I think again it might just be a moisture problem. So this is a plant that does like humidity and water. I do mist it as I missed all my other orchids, so I don't think that is an issue, but I just do think the base watering is a problem. I also think that I may have just potted this in perhaps a too free draining a mix. So this is medium bark with, I think, a little bit of charcoal and a bit of perlite, but not much, if any, sphagnum moss. I can't remember. So I feel, plant lovers, what I'm going to have to do is actually repot this in a medium that is a bit more moisture retentive, so that the roots aren't going to dry out and perhaps get into a bit more of a dehydrated shock too often. And the pseudobulbs aren't particularly wrinkled, but they do look a tiny bit dehydrated. And again, other images I've seen, the bulbs are really shiny and lustrous, and mine just aren't. So I think there's a few things going on here. The other thing I've read though is that although they do like to be moist, they do like a slightly drier rest period once the new growths have matured, which is in winter, but it is now winter and I have got new growths coming. So I'm just going to have to dance to my own tune with this. I think it's just common sense. I have new growths growing and I've already lost one from my own misadventures. So I'm really keen not to lose any of these, which means I'm going to continue to water it and feed it through winter until this growth has finished maturing. This one has also got a bit of a black leaf issue in the middle, and I'm fearful that I might lose that spike as well. So I'm really not sure. Sometimes black leaves in the middle can be quite simply a deficiency of something, but it has kind of the same basic fertilizer as anything else. And according to everything I've read, it doesn't particularly need sort of special pH levels in its soil. So now I have treated it with a systemic fungicide. I've given it a good treatment. So it's had 2 treatments, and I think whatever may have affected it, which I caused by, I think, just getting dampness into the leaf joints, whatever that may have been, I feel has gone because the newest growth is looking really healthy and sort of unperturbed. So I think that hurdle is over. The next hurdle is really just keeping it moisturized correctly. I'm bewitched, bothered and bewildered, plant lovers. So if anyone grows this Celia Bella and you're triumphant with it, do let me know, regardless of where you are in terms of your climate, because I'm just keen to know anyone's tips about growing this successfully. Because it's limped through, so clearly it's not that unhappy because it's managed to flower, but I feel I could do a whole lot better with this orchid. Anyway, I think the other problem is I've got it in a spot that is slightly out of the way, so I do tend to forget it, but it gets beautiful dappled light and it's quite warm and relatively humid. So maybe it just needs to be more in my sight line, and then I remember to water it. Anyway, I am now going to go off and water it with a little bit of liquid diluted fertilizer, and just hope that I can maintain the growth of these new growths here, so we get some new soda bulbs maturing for next year to repeat the flowering, because I'm really keen to see if I can improve on this next year. So plant lovers, if I do improve upon it, I will certainly make a follow-up video to say, this is what I did better, this is what I did wrong. But if you do have any suggestions, please leave them below. I'm very keen to hear about your experiences with Coelia bella. And just in case you're interested, I got this in Australia from a nursery that specializes in species orchids. It's called Dark Star, and I'll put their name below if you're in Australia and remotely interested. There we are, plant lovers. Thank you for listening to my Jeremiad of this poor plant. I've tried, haven't completely failed because it's not dead and it's flowered, but not a triumph. And you know, we all like to improve, don't we? Let me know your thoughts, and I do look forward to seeing you next week. Hit subscribe if you want to know what my continuing adventure or sorry tale might be, and I do look forward to seeing you next week. I hope all's well in your world, and until then, take care.